Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections, along with the daily mains answer writing program. In the analysis part, we'll first have a comprehensive discussion with respect to the increasing cases of judicial interventions in the matters of religion and the associated constitutional provisions. Then, in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the 16th Finance Commission, the constitutional provisions, major recommendations, challenges, and way forward. Then, in the prelims pointer section, we'll have a discussion with respect to 5 different articles from a special perspective of upcoming UPSC prelims 2026, along with the value addition. So stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to religion, constitution, and courts. In societies like India, religion forms a very sensitive topic. It forms the very core, the very integral element of one's culture, one's way of living. So it is but natural that we have had witnessed a lot of cases surrounding the religious disputes. For example, the temple entry rights, or with respect to the religious conversions, or with respect to the different rights exercised by various sects within a particular religion. So that's the one thing. The second thing which you'll have to understand is that the way in which the judiciary or the legislature or the executive looked at this particular issue of religious disputes, it has evolved with time. That is, the way in which they looked at these issues pre-independence is quite different from the way in which they look right now. And it is primarily because of the evolution of jurisprudence with respect to the religious disputes. The third thing which you'll have to understand is that there has been a growth of cases with respect to the judicial interventions in the matters of religion. And it is primarily attributed to the growth of awareness with respect to the individual liberties. So primarily, the religious disputes are nothing but, in a general sense, it's a fight between the individual liberties versus the community rights with respect to the faiths. And in this particular column, which has been published in the Hindu, what the authors are saying is that the courts have played a very important role and they have upheld the constitutional morality. They have looked at the issues of religious disputes from the lens of constitutional morality, and they should continue to doing so. So they have mentioned about 2 recent cases in which the Madras High Court has taken a decision. So what they are saying is that it is really important for the courts, for the constitutional courts, to basically look at these issues from the lens of constitutional morality. So what we are going to do today is we'll first look at this concept of secularism, a highly debated topic, a very important one. What secularism is all about? What are these 2 branches which separate the Indian secularism with the Western? What has been the evolution of jurisprudence or the legislative take with respect to the religious disputes over time, pre-independence and post-independence? What are the challenges with respect to the judicial interventions in the matters of religion? And what should be the way forward? Believe me, it's going to be a very important topic and a highly probable topic for the mains and a very important discussion. Part of GS2 fundamental rights. What the authors are saying is judiciary has ensured that religious practices do not undermine the constitutional principles. So we'll have a discussion with respect to that. Let's first talk about, in general, that what do we mean by secularism? See, secularism, in general, what it means is that the state has no official religion. That is, we are not a theocratic society. Any state, if it calls itself secular, that is not a theocratic society. It's not based on religion, right? Second thing is, the state maintains neutrality in the matters of religion. That is, it would not discriminate against a particular religion, or it would not be biased in favor of a particular religion. It would maintain the neutrality aspect. Third is, citizens enjoy freedom of conscience, their inner feeling of attachment with the God or with that universal entity, and the religious practices. So they are free to basically have any kind of religious practices. These are 3 general notions which describe what secularism is all about. But there has been a constant debate with respect to the Indian notions of secularism and the Western notions of secularism. See, let's talk about the historical context. Why we have this particular difference? Whenever we talk about the Western model of secularism, always remember that the Western model of secularism is born out of conflict. It is born out of conflict. And when I'm saying conflict, I'm trying to tell you the conflict between the church versus the state, right? There has been Protestant Reformation movements, right? Bloodshed. So therefore, it is the result of conflict. And also, as famously remarked by Thomas Jefferson, that once we talk about the Western model, it is nothing but a wall of separation, a clear wall of separation between the religion and the state, the church and the state. Once we talk about the Indian model, it is born out of diversity. Diversity. So the Indian model is born out of diversity. The Western model is born out of conflicts. Once we are talking about diversity, we are talking about the civilizational pluralism, which we have valued over the years. We are a multi-religious societies, and that has shaped, or that has basically led to the evolution of Indian version of secularism. So what you can say is that once we talk about the Western model, it's a negative concept. It talks about the rigid separation between the state and the church. Whereas the Indian concept is a positive one, where what we say is that we respect all religions and the state has the authority to intervene in the secular aspects of religion, right? So what are the differences? Look at this. Once we talk about the Indian secularism, we believe in positive secularism, the positive aspects of different religions. We value that, mutual respect and agreement. Once we talk about Western secularism, it's a negative concept, a strict separation between the church and the state, no intervention by the state in the matters of religion. And religion is completely a private sphere. It should not be shown in the public, right? Once we talk about the state, we follow principled distance. What it means? That if the state wants, it can regulate certain aspects of religious practices. Principled distance. Once we talk about the Western secularism, the state cannot intervene in the matters of religion. Then state intervention permissible for reform and welfare. And over here in the Western, it is minimal. Minority rights, explicit protection. We have Article 29, Article 30, which protects the minorities. So that's the very positive notion of secularism, right? Over here, we value the individual rights, not the minority rights. Then we have Uniform Civil Code. So we have the directive principles under Article 44, which directs the state to go with the Uniform Civil Code. Over here, there is no such issue, right? So this is a basic difference between the Indian and the Western model. Now, once we talk about the religious aspects, what the Constitution talks about, and these are very important constitutional provisions, also important from the perspective of prelims. We have the very important Article 14, equality before law and equal protection of laws. See, once we talk about Article 14, it talks about these two concepts. Equality before law. It's a negative concept, right? Which talks about the absence of privileges. Once we talk about the equal protection of laws, it's a positive concept, which talks about that similarly situated people should be treated in a similar manner, right? Then we have Article 15, which basically 15 subclause 1. It prohibits the state to discriminate on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth. Then we have 15 subclause 1, subclause 2, which basically says that no one would be subjected to any liability, restriction, or disability as far as we talk about the access to the public places, the bathing ghats, on the basis of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth. So over here, one thing again becomes important to understand that 15 subclause 1, it is a vertical right available against the state, whereas 15 subclause 2, it's a horizontal right available against the state as well as the individual. A very important notion, can be asked in the prelims, right? So overall, Article 15, it's a horizontal right, where specifically 15 subclause 1 is a vertical right and 15 subclause 2 is a horizontal right. Then we have freedom of religion. We have Article 25. We have Article 26. Article 25 talks about the inner freedom, the freedom of conscience, and the right to freely profess, practice, and propagate religion. Or we have Article 26, which talks about every religious denomination or section thereof will have the right to manage its own affairs, to have its own properties and to manage them, right? So again, these are the articles which provide, or the fundamental rights which provide for the freedom of religion, right? Then we have Article 29 and 30, which talks about protecting the distinct language, culture, or script, 30 talks about the rights of the minorities to establish the educational institutions. So we have explicitly provided the rights for the minorities also. That is what makes the Indian secularism as a positive aspect of secularism, right? Now, once we are talking about Article 25 and 26, something is very important. Article 25 and 26, they are qualified rights. What do you mean by qualified rights? Article 25 very clearly says, subject to public order, morality, and health, all people would be entitled to the freedom of conscience and the right to freely profess, practice, and propagate the religion. So, also there is one condition. So, Article 25 starts with the exception part. It says, subject to public order, morality, health, and to the other provisions of Part 3rd. All people would be entitled to freedom of conscience and the right to freely practice, propagate, and profess religion, right? So we have the conditions of exceptions in place. Similarly, once we talk about Article 26, it again has exceptions subject to public order, morality, and health, not the other provisions of Part 3rd. So these are qualified rights. What it means? If I am saying that Article 25 and 26 are qualified rights, the state and the judiciary can regulate the religious practices subject to these conditions. So that is what gives the power to the judiciary and the state to intervene in religious practices, right? So this is what you'll have to understand. Now, what has been the historical evolution with respect to the judicial and legislative sense once we are talking about the religious disputes? If we talk about the pre-constitution era, it was treated as an issue of civil entitlement. The very first case was of Shankaralinga Nadan versus Raja Rajeswara Dorai of 1908, where we had the Nadar community and its access to the Kamudi temple was questioned, right? So they basically petitioned in the court that why aren't we allowed to enter this particular temple? So the case went to the Privy Council in London and it was adjudicated. And the case was seen not from the angle of any of the rights, but as civil entitlement. So it was a civil case, right? Then we have the Madras Hindu Religious Endowment Act of 1927, which provided for that the state would have the power to supervise different temples to make sure that they have the power to decide the committees with respect to the temples, or the appointment of priests, or the auditing of the temples. So there was an explicit clause which provided for state interventions in the working of the temple, in the organization of the temple, right? Now, post 1950, what we have seen is the constitutionalization of religious disputes. We came up with the Part 3rd in the Indian Constitution, which talks about the fundamental rights. So we are giving values to the fundamental rights. Whatever disputes are being adjudicated, they are being adjudicated on the basis of whether they are in line with the fundamental rights or not, right? Adoption of the Constitution with Article 25 and 26, which talks about the freedom of religion. The Article 25 talks about the freedom with respect to the conscience and the right to freely practice, propagate, or profess the religion, whereas Article 26 talks about the right to manage the religious affairs, right to buy properties and to manage them, right? Courts have examined the various temple disputes after the commencement of the Constitution, not as civil matters, but rather on the grounds of whether they are in line with the constitutional principles or not. So there has been the exercise of constitutional jurisprudence in the matters of religious disputes. And what has been the statutory framework? See, this is what the courts have been doing. Courts are looking at the religious disputes from the angle of the constitutional provisions, from the lens of the constitutional provisions. On the other hand, we have the statutory framework, we have the legislature coming and controlling the secular aspects. Now, why this is possible? Because we have Article 25 subclause 2, which provides that the state can make any law and it can regulate the economic, the financial, the political, or the secular aspects of religious practices. So state can definitely regulate that. Throw open Hindus' institutions of public nature to all sections of the Hindus. So that is what gives the power to the state to intervene in this aspect, right? We came up with the Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments Acts. Various states, for example, Tamil Nadu, Madras came up with the Madras Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments. Later, it was renamed as Tamil Nadu. Karnataka has come up with that. Various states have come up with these Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments Act. Primarily, the very objective is to regulate the activities of the temples or various endowments, to decide that who is going to be appointed as the priest, what is going to be the framework with respect to the auditing of these temples, right? So what we can say is that the state is intervening in the matters of religion. It is not a private matter. It's not purely a private matter. The state has the authority to intervene in the workings, in the organization of the temple. Then judicial oversights. We have had many cases where judiciary has intervened. Even now, there have been cases with respect to the qualifications of the priests in various temples, and various high courts have given their verdicts that whether we should abide by this or not, right? Now, what have been the various tests and principles which have been developed by the courts, right? What have been the various doctrines, in essence, which have been developed by the courts? The very first case can be seen in terms of the Essential Religious Practices Test, the ERP test, which was evolved in the very famous Shirur Mutt case of 1954, Shirur Mutt case versus State of Karnataka, where what the court said was that in a particular religion, there has to be the determination of certain practices which are essential component, which are integral component of the religion, and to differentiate the essential practices with that of the customary or secular practices. In normal circumstances, the courts would not interfere with the essential practices, but they can basically intervene in these customary or secular practices in order to make sure that they are in line with the fundamental rights. They are in line with the principles of constitutional morality. And what constitutional morality comprises of? It primarily comprises of the objectives which are enshrined in the preamble, that of the equality, fraternity, justice, liberty, right? And this introduces objectivity. To introduce objectivity, that which particular practice is an integral component of the religion and which is a practice which is secular, which is amenable to change, which can be changed, right? Then we have constitutional morality, the very important case of Indian Young Lawyers Association versus State of Kerala, popularly known as the Sabarimala judgment. So we had the women from the age group of 10 to 50 of the menstrual age group. They were prohibited to enter the sanctorum of the temple. And what the court said in this particular verdict was that this is unconstitutional. It is biased. It is violating Article 14. It is violating Article 25. And what they said was that constitutional morality is supreme. And it quoted one of the very important judgment made in Navtej Singh Johar case of 2018, Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India of 2018, where the Supreme Court very categorically and beautifully said that constitutional morality cannot be allowed to be martyred at the altar of social morality. We cannot give undue importance to social morality. Rather, we have to give importance to the constitutional morality. And it is the constitutional morality which permeates into the rule of law. It is the constitutional morality which determines what is going to be the rule of law. Very important lines. And in this particular case, what the Supreme Court, it went a step further. Because previously in Shirur Mutt case, what it said, that we will have to differentiate the essential practices versus the customary or secular practices. And these customary or secular practices, they can be changed. They can be, over here we can make an intervention in order to align these practices with the fundamental rights. But in this particular case, what the Supreme Court said, that even the essential religious practices are subject to change. If they are not in line with the constitutional principles of equality, fraternity, liberty, justice, so they can be struck down, right? Right to worship and practice has been a constant evolution with respect to the Supreme Court. So it has allowed various, sects or various groups. In Vijay Emanuel case, the rights of different sects were very clearly specified. And even in this particular article, what the authors talk about is this: the rights of the Tenkarai sect to recite hymns at the Kanchipuram Varadaraja Perumal temple. So we have had debates which primarily were the contestations between various sects in a particular religion, whether they have the right to worship or not. And Supreme Court has taken a very broad view regarding this, right? Now, what you'll have to understand is that why we are witnessing the religious litigations. More and more cases are being petitioned in various courts. Why is it that so? One reason which I already told you, that there has been a growth. There has been a growth with respect to the awareness of rights. People are more aware of the individual liberties. And whenever you have a particular practice in a religion which counters or which is basically prohibiting or hampering the individual liberties, then they are subject to questions. So what we are right now witnessing is the ideological polarization within the religion or among different religions. Then we are also witnessing the sectarian rights. Different sects in a particular religion, they are contesting for their rights. Because one particular sect, allegedly, it is dominating over the other. And it is compromising the interests of the other sect. So therefore, the other sect also want to exercise equal rights. And therefore, we are witnessing more number of cases. Then we have the aspects of tradition versus equality. Tradition says something which goes against the equality principle. So therefore, it is bound to be questioned in the court of law. Right? So these are the issues, primarily because of which we are witnessing the cases of temple entry movements. There have been what are going to be the rights with respect to temple entry, whether a particular community would be allowed to enter the temple or not, or a particular gender would be allowed to enter in a temple or not, or with respect to the religious conversions. So we are witnessing the flood of petitions. Now, what are the challenges? In this particular regard, once the courts are primarily intervening and taking a stand, what are the challenges which are involved? The very first is the doctrinal ambiguities. See, what you'll have to understand is, in the very famous Shirur Mutt case, Supreme Court came up with the essential religious practices test. But there are issues with respect to the ERP. The very first is that the interpretation is being done by the judges and they lack the aspects of theology. So they are not experts in theology or the science of religion or the study of religion, but they are interpreting the theological aspects on the basis of constitutional provisions. So sometimes it counters the traditional beliefs and customs of the people. Second thing which you'll have to understand is that there has been an inconsistency. Inconsistency with respect to the application of ERP, essential religious practices, among various religions. What people perceive is that there has been a discrimination against one particular religion, or there has been a bias in favor of one particular religion. So these are some of the issues. So again, there is this aspect of subject matter overreach. See, judges, what you'll have to understand, that they are not experts in theology. They are being told of what a particular practice is all about. And then they are deciding on the basis of constitutional provisions. But religious practices, according to what people say, the petitioners, they have been in that particular phase. They have been in practice for thousands of years. So that is a question which remains. Then we have secularism misunderstood. In India's case, as we started the discussion, we follow a positive concept of secularism, a positive notion, right? Where we have equal respect for all religions. And we also accept those secular practices of a particular religion, and different people can follow it. Whereas in the Western model, there's a strict separation between the church and the state. But right now, what we are witnessing is that courts are pronouncing those verdicts, which basically push the religion as a private sphere. So we are witnessing a shift towards the Western separationism. Ideally, we should not follow this separationism. We have our own concept, but because of the rise of the awareness of the individual liberties or the fundamental rights or the constitutional morality, the concepts of constitutional morality, what we are witnessing is that religion is now being pushed as a private sphere, as a matter of private sphere, which is again a characteristics of the Western secularism. Then we have practices versus fundamental rights. It is very difficult to come up with a fine balance between what one particular practice is a particular practice in line with the fundamental rights or not. It's a very difficult question to be solved. And in different cases, the courts have taken different parameters to judge a particular case. So there has been an inconsistency. Then we have federalism and personal laws. What we are trying to say through this, we have, for example, different states coming up with the different personal laws. Civil rights. We have states like Uttarakhand, which has recently come with the Uniform Civil Code. So this is a state subject where states have come up with their own rules and regulations. On the other hand, we have different temple rights, or how the temple would be organized, the committees would be organized, the supervision with respect to the temple, how it's going to take place. Different laws have been made by different states. But the issue is that once you have the petition with respect to one particular religious dispute, it goes in various high courts. Various high courts, many of the times, have taken various stands. And then the matters goes to the Supreme Court. So there are issues with respect to federalism and personal laws. Because we have different personal laws, civil rights in different states, right? What should be the way forward? What should be the way forward with respect to judiciary in particular, if there is a judicial intervention? The very first is there has to be a clarity. There has to be a clarity with respect to the doctrines the Supreme Court is coming up with. If the Supreme Court is coming up with a particular doctrine, there has to be the consistent application of that doctrine to all the religions, first of all. And whenever the doctrine is being implemented, there has to be a particular framework. Inputs must be taken from the theologians who have a base, who have a subject matter expertise in the religion, right? There has to be uniform and transparent framework. Then we have judicial restraint with sensitivity, especially in the matters of religion. Judiciary should not pass those verdicts which are of extreme nature. See, again, that has to be in line with the constitutional principles. Nobody is disregarding that. But what happens that if judiciary passes a verdict which is of extreme nature, then that basically creates resentment among the people. And then that further adds to conflicts in the society. It basically affects the harmony in the society. And the very base of Indian secularism is based on harmony. That is what you'll have to understand. Balanced secularism in practice. We need to emphasize upon our own concept of secularism, that is positive secularism. If we separate the religion from the state, or if we push the religion to the private sphere, we are in a way adopting the Western notion. And that is something which again is based on the binary aspects. It is a complete, what it says is that there's a pure difference between the interest of the state and that the interest of the religion. So we'll have to come out of this binary, because we have a positive concept where the state can definitely intervene in the secular and the financial or the political aspect of religious practice. Then we have dispute resolution mechanisms. Why can't we come up with a special benches in different high courts? Or pre-litigation. Why can't we have a kind of a gathering of different people where through arbitration we resolve the conflicts? Why there is a need for increase in the litigation? Different theologians, different community members, eminent people of different communities can come together and discuss. If there is a dispute among religion, we can have people from different religions coming and discussing. Or if there's a dispute in a particular religion, within a particular religion, then we can have the interlocutors. We can have people from different sects coming together and discussing, right? Next, we have public education and awareness. There has to be a focus upon creating awareness with respect to constitutional morality. People should value constitutional morality more as compared to social morality. Traditions and customs, if they are infringing any of the fundamental rights, they should not be accepted. Right? So there has to be a growth of awareness. That is very important. Definitely it would lead to more petitions, but it would also lead to more egalitarian society. A society which gives importance to all the genders and all the classes and all the different castes in a particular religion. So that is what you'll have to understand. So what we are trying to say is that judicial intervention is important, but there has to be some sensitivity involved. Because in the matters of religion, it's a very sensitive issue. So there has to be the incorporation of the theologians, incorporation of those people who have subject matter expertise in this particular domain. Because if the judiciary comes with a particular verdict, which is, even though if it's based on the constitutional morality, if it creates the resentment, then definitely it would add to the conflicts in the society and it would affect the harmony aspect. I hope it's clear. Let's have a means practice question. It says, Indian secularism is characterized by principled intervention rather than strict separation. Discuss the evolution of religious jurisprudence, what all things we have discussed with respect to pre-independence and post-independence, associated challenges, and suggest a balanced way forward. Very important topic. Please do write 15 marks, 250 words. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to fiscal federalism. the 16th Finance Commission. So the 16th Finance Commission has given its recommendation for a time period of 2026 till 2031, and the Government of India has majorly accepted all the recommendations. Now, let's first talk about the constitutional background with respect to the Finance Commission. We have Article 270, which talks about the distribution of the net proceeds of taxes between the center and the state. I would be really happy if you tell me that who certifies the net proceeds of taxes? What is that authority which certifies the net proceeds of taxes? And if possible, also tell me what do we mean by the net proceeds of taxes? Then we have Article 280, which talks about the Constitution of Finance Commission by the President of India. What is the main task of the Finance Commission? It is articulated in Article 280, subclause 3, where it talks about first the vertical devolution. It gives recommendation that how much of the distribution or the devolution of funds would take place with respect to the net proceeds of taxes between the union and the states. Then it talks about the horizontal devolution, that is among different states, how it is to be distributed. Then it also talks about the principles which guide the grants and aid to the states. Then it also talks about that how to strengthen the consolidated fund of different states in order to make sure that they give more resources to the Panchayati Raj institutions and the municipalities. And finally, any other matter which the President may ask the Commission to ponder upon and give its recommendation. Now, what you'll have to understand is that we have the divisible pool of taxes. What is that basket which is to be divided between the center and the states, and then we'll decide how to basically redistribute it among different states. The divisible pool of taxes, it primarily constitutes, for example, the income tax, the proceeds of the income tax, the corporation tax, or the CGST, Central GST, or the center's component in the IGST, Integrated Goods and Services Tax. So this forms the divisible pool of taxes. What you'll have to understand is that the divisible pool of taxes, which is to be divided or devolved between the center and the states and among different states, it does not include the cesses and surcharges. Now, this is the sole prerogative of the union government. And this has been one of the biggest points of contestation, one of the biggest points of conflict. Because what the states say is that the center gets a lot of resources through the imposition of cesses and surcharges. For example, for the financial year 2025-26, the divisible pool, it comprised of 81% of the gross tax resources, gross tax revenue. Means what? The divisible pool only comprises 81% of the gross tax revenues. What about the rest, 19%? It is nothing but the cesses and surcharge. So 19% is a very substantial amount, and that does not form a part of the divisible pool of taxes. Now, let's talk about that how things have evolved with respect to the Finance Commission. What have been their recommendations over the years? If we talk about the 13th Finance Commission, whose recommendations were applicable from the year 2010 till 2015, it primarily recommended 32% of devolution to the states. But in addition to 32%, there was a large component where there were conditional transfers to the states by the union in the form of centrally sponsored scheme. A lot many schemes. But these transfers were conditional in nature. Then the 14th Finance Commission, which was for a time period 2015 till 2020, it significantly increased the devolution to 42%. But at the same time, it significantly reduced the transfers with respect to the centrally sponsored scheme to the different states. Though it increased the overall devolution to 42% from 32%, but it reduced the transfers with respect to the centrally sponsored scheme. Then the 15th Finance Commission, whose recommendations were applicable from 2020 till 2026, it reduced the devolution to 41%, primarily because of the resources which were routed to the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. I hope it is clear. Now, see, once we talk about the horizontal devolution, this is what we talked about, the vertical devolution between the center and the states. Finance Commission uses certain parameters on the basis of which it decides that how much is to be distributed among different states. Various Finance Commissions over the years have taken various parameters. For example, we have the income distance. What is the income distance? That let's say you have a particular state, the per capita income of the state which is highest. Let's say there's a particular state whose per capita income is highest among different states in India. Now, this is, let's say, the state A. And we have the other state over here whose per capita income lies somewhere here. So this is the income distance, the difference between the state having the highest per capita and that of the other states. That is the income distance. So the income distance has been the most important factor of consideration for various finance commissions over the year, right? So this, in a way, they are giving importance to the principles of equity, right? You can just see its share was 47.5% for the 13th Finance Commission, increased to 50% for the 14th, then again 45 for the 15th, and right now it is maintained at 42.5%. These parameters are very important. They can be really very important for the upcoming prelims, so please pay attention. So the 16th Finance Commission has given weightage of 42.5% to the income distance. Then we have the population of 1971 census. This was given importance in 13th, in 14th, but not in 15th, neither in 16th. Population with respect to the 2011 census was not given importance in 13th, was given 10% weightage in 14th, 15% weightage in 15th, and it has been given 17.5% weightage in the 16th Finance Commission. Then we have the area. The area of that particular concerned state was given 10% weightage in 13th, 15th percent weightage in both 14th and 15th, and again it has been given 10% weightage in the 16th Finance Commission in its recommendations. Then we have the forest. Again, it talks about the aspects of efficiency, whether the state is able to maintain the forest or not, whether it is following an ecologically good trajectory or not. So once we talk about the income distance, this is a parameter which is based on the equity. Once we talk about the population and area, it in a way talks about the need of the state. What is the overall need of the state? And the other parameters, the forest, the fiscal discipline, the demographic performance, the tax effort, and the newly introduced criteria, which is state's contribution to GDP. These are all based on the efficiency, whether the state is really efficient or not. I hope it is clear. Fiscal discipline was given a weightage of almost 17.5% in the 13th Finance Commission. Then it was later for the 14th and the 15th and the 16th, it was not considered. Then we have demographic performance. This was given 12.5% weightage in the 15th Finance Commission and has been given 10% weightage with respect to the 16th Finance Commission. Also, the forest has been given a 10% weightage in the 16th Finance Commission. Then a new category has been considered by the Finance Commission, and that is the state's contribution to the GDP. Very important, can be asked in the prelims. So for the earlier Finance Commission, we never considered this. This time we are considering, and the weightage is 10%. So do remember the weightage also, which is the highest, which is the lowest. What is the the hierarchy in which these parameters have been placed. Now, if you look at these parameters, what you would find is that since 13th Finance Commission, equity and need, equity in terms of the income distance, need in terms of the population and the area, it has been given more weightage as compared to the efficiency. We are still in that mode where we are not incentivizing those states which are more efficient, who are contributing more to the GDP. Those states who have worked with respect to the population control strategies, right? Family planning measures. So we have these southern Indian states, including Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka and other states, which have significantly taken a lot of steps as we talk about controlling the population, total fertility rate, but they have not been incentivized, and that is what they review about. That is what their concern is, that we have implemented a lot of measures, and instead of being incentivized, we are being penalized. That we have taken all these issues, we have taken all these interventions, we have worked, we have made great progress as far as the human development indicators are concerned. Maternal mortality rate, the infant mortality rate, we have significantly reduced them. So why we are not being incentivized? On the other hand, the states, the northern Indian states of UP, Bihar and all these states, over here the population boom is again a constant phenomena. When we talk about the human development indicators, not much improvement has been visible. So what the southern Indian states say is that you are still incentivizing those states which have not performed better. So the efficiency criteria has not been taken into account according to different states, what they say. Now, what are the recommendations of the 16th Finance Commission overall? Once we talk about the vertical devolution, it has retained at 41%, which was taken by the 15th Finance Commission. Many of the states, they demanded that the overall devolution must be increased to almost 45 to 48%. But according to the Finance Commission, it has been retained at 41%. And it has given a lot of reasons. What are the rationales that they have retained at 41%. What the Finance Commission says is that we have, as the total collection of the union with respect to the taxes, the central government collects almost 76% of the overall revenues with respect to the taxes, and states combined, they collect almost 24%. Out of this 76%, we are transferring 41% to you. So you already have 24% and we are transferring 41%. Then we also have the centrally sponsored scheme where a lot of transfers are being given to various states. So what, according to Finance Commission, what they are saying is that there is already a lot of transfer which the states are getting. We understand that you have a lot of responsibility with respect to the education or health or agriculture. But what you'll have to understand is that you have a significant revenue collection. Then you are getting a lot of amount, 41% out of this particular thing. And then you also have the transfers with respect to the centrally sponsored scheme. Next thing, what the Finance Commission has said is that if we will increase this 41%, then that would strain the capacity of the center. Center has a very important role for some of the very important national priorities, for example, defense. See, all these things which I'm telling you is according to the Finance Commission. Or the infrastructure. You take into consideration the national infrastructure pipeline or the various projects we are witnessing, the highways or the pipelines. So center has a lot of responsibility with respect to the defense outlays. So we cannot constrain the overall abilities of the center. It must be given that leg space, that space with respect to the financial resources. Once we talk about the horizontal devolution, Finance Commission has said that we must abide by certain principles. Certain principles should guide that how the funds with respect to the states, how they would be devolved among different states, horizontal devolution. We have gradualism. We cannot directly jump from the equity or need principles to that of efficiency. There has to be a particular time frame, and if you will jump suddenly to the efficiency parameters, those states which have a lot of reliance with respect to the equity and need aspect, the North Indian states, they would be at disadvantage. So there has to be a gradualist approach. We should slowly transition to the efficiency principles, there should not be a sudden drastic transition towards the efficiency principles. And recognition of efficiency we have definitely done. Because according to the Finance Commission, what it is saying is that we have incorporated a new item, which is a new parameter, which is the state's contribution to the GDP at almost 10%. So this is a good measure, right? New criteria has been introduced, and this would result into a directional shift towards efficiency. We will not witness a sudden transition. Rather, it would be a directional shift, which would be an indication to those North Indian states or the other states who have not performed as far as the South Indian states, Southern Indian states, to work on those parameters, to come out with, to contribute to the GDP, to work on the human development indicators. That would be a kind of an incentive to these North Indian states. And it would also serve as a directive to them, right? A direction shift towards efficiency. Now, what are the challenges with respect to 16th Finance Commission? What different states have actually said? Again, a very important topic I'm repeating, not just for the prelims, but also for the mains. Many states said that the very first thing which they said, that there has to be the inclusion of cess and surcharge. Because as I told you, even in the financial year 24, cess and surcharge contributed to almost, or their share in the gross tax revenue was almost 19%. So this is a substantial amount, right? And if it is not being included, that is constraining the abilities of the states to have more resources. Simple as that. But Finance Commission has categorically rejected this particular thing. It is saying, first of all, that cess and surcharge helps the center to deal with particular exigencies in particular domains, because cess is always for a particular purpose. Education cess, climate change cess, whatever. So it helps the center to deal with a particular domain. That's the first point. Second thing, what the Finance Commission has said is that it is constitutionally impermissible to lower down the cesses and surcharges. It depends upon the center to do it. So we cannot lower it down. But what we can follow is a kind of, and we'll see what can be the ways adopted with respect to the cess and surcharge in the way forward. Next is balancing the equity versus efficiency. Many of the North Indian states, what they're saying is that you are transitioning to efficiency, but it would compromise our interest. For example, UP and Bihar. So they also have their own concern. They are saying that we are having a lot of population. We have structural disadvantages, historical disadvantages. So you should not have considered this efficiency parameter. Because what would happen is, because of the incorporation of the state's contribution to GDP at 10%, the western and the southern Indian states would see a marginal increase in the overall devolution, whereas the North Indian state would see a marginal decrease. So it also is a concern for the North Indian states. Then limited increase despite demand. States were demanding almost 45 to 48% of the devolution, but that has not been accepted. Primarily because, according to Finance Commission, center has a very important role in other spheres, in defense and infrastructure. Then we have fiscal federalism versus central priorities. See, again, what you'll have to understand is, states in a way, they are dependent upon the center. And center cannot give each and everything what it has, because it has its own priorities. So even what we'll have to consider is the fact that states must mobilize their own resources. They must make sure that they are coming up with their own resources. And for that, they'll have to significantly invest. So this leads to the debate between whether center is devolving enough resources or not, fiscal federalism, and what the priorities of center are. Okay. Now, what should be the way forward? The very first thing is rationalize the cess and surcharge. We are not saying that you completely end the cess and surcharge, or you transfer the resources or include in the divisible pool of taxes. But what we can have is a sunset clause or a cap. There has to be a limit to which the cess and surcharge can be imposed, not to the extent of 19% of the overall gross tax revenue. There has to be a limit. Or you decide that when we are going to end it, sunset clause. Then we have strengthen the own revenue mobilization. Very important. States must, see, because of the political hesitancy, because of the voter base, states are not really inclined to impose taxes. For example, the stamp duties, for example, the land taxes or professional taxes, they should impose so that they can gather more of their own resources. Then we have enhance the incentives for growth. Over here, we have gone with the state's contribution to GDP. Why can't we adopt other parameters? For example, ease of doing business. Or let's talk about the human development indicators. Which states in the last 10 years, which are all those states which have performed very good as far as the human development indicators are concerned. So there should be adoption of more of these parameters. Fiscal responsibility and budget management. There are restrictions which are placed, and even Economic Survey this year talked about that many of the states, what they're doing is they are recklessly spending the money, primarily to woo the voters. That should not be done in terms of the freebies. So whatever spending you are doing, it should be in a proper rational manner. It should focus upon the outcome you want to achieve. And therefore, both states and center, they should abide by the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act of 2003. Cooperative federalism mechanisms. Why not explore different mechanisms? For example, in terms of the GST Council. Why can't we have a more harmonious relation? Why can't we explore the Interstate Council? Or let's say we have the empowered group of ministers. So different mechanisms which usher in cooperative spirit between the center and the states must be explored. This is what you'll have to understand. So again, what we are trying to say is definitely 16th Finance Commission has, the good part is that it has done a favor to the states by incorporating, especially the southern Indian states and the western states, by incorporating the overall contribution to the GDP. But what you'll have to understand is it has still retained at 41%. And which many of the states demanded to be increased to almost 45 to 48%. So let's see what the things are going to be. But again, it's a step in the right direction. Let's have a mains practice question. Discuss how the 16th Finance Commission's recommendations reflect the evolving nature of fiscal federalism in India. Examine the challenges in revenue devolution and suggest a way forward. Simple 10 marks question. Do right. Let's go to the next section. Coming to the prelims pointer section, we have the very first topic which talks about the Ken-Betwa linkage project. But what we'll be doing is we'll be also talking about the National River Linking Project. So there have been protests surrounding this particular project, and because of that, the FIRs have been filed. 3 FIRs have been lodged in Madhya Pradesh, Chhatarpur against a group of people after a protest they took against the Ken-Betwa River Linking Project and the arrest of a local activist turned violent, the police said on Wednesday. Now, what this particular project is all about, the article itself talks about that. Flagged off by Prime Minister Narendra Modi on December 25th, 2024, the Ken-Betwa Link project is the first of the 30 such projects under the National Perspective Plan to divert waters from the rivers with surplus water to those of deficit water. So primarily it's an act of balancing where you are transferring the surplus water in particular river to that of in the deficit regions. It plans to transfer excess water from the Ken River Basin to the Betwa River Basin in the Bundelkhand region that covers parts of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. Now, let's talk about the National River Linking Project. The idea of interlinking of rivers, primarily to transfer water from the surplus to the deficit regions, was first proposed by Sir Arthur Cotton in 1850s. So it's a pre-independent idea, right? It was then revived in 1972 by K.L. Rao, then India's Minister for Power and Irrigation, initiated in 1980s under the National Perspective Plan. So what you call this particular thing as the project, the whole project for all the rivers, what all rivers we have included as the National Perspective Plan. And in 1982, the National Water Development Agency was set up to study the feasibility of river linking. In 2021, the Centre proposed the National Interlinking of Rivers Authority, NIRA, as the apex implementing body for NPP and to replace the NWDA. So the National Water Development Agency has been replaced by the NIRA. Simple as that. The objectives of the program, it aims to transfer water from surplus to deficit regions, potentially irrigating 30 million hectares and generating almost 20,000 to 25,000 megawatt of power, almost 20 to 25 gigawatts. It is seen as a way to mitigate the floods and droughts, increase rural income and aid navigation, because once you'll have transferred to those of deficit regions, more agriculture productivity would be there, and that would in a way increase the farmer's income. NWDA has identified the following components: Himalayan rivers development. So primarily it divides into two parts: the Himalayan river systems and the peninsular river systems. 14 links focusing on the northern rivers like Ganga and Brahmaputra. Peninsular rivers development, 16 links including the Ken-Betwa link. Intra-state links for within the state management. Now this is what you can have a look. We have different rivers. We have the Himalayan component and we have the peninsular component. And these numbers, what you are witnessing, 1, 2, 3, 4, these are the linkage project which we are talking about with respect to the northern component and the southern component. I hope it is clear. You can just have a look. Now, about the Ken-Betwa link project, part of India's National River Linking Project aimed to divert surplus water from the Ken Basin. Remember that. The surplus water from the Ken Basin to that of the Betwa, to water scarce areas in the Betwa Basin, covering parts of Bundelkhand, the drought prone areas. Completion target is by 2030. Location spans across Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh. So it's not just with respect to Madhya Pradesh, rather it also includes, look at this. We have this particular Ken River and we are creating a Daudhan dam over here. Water would be transferred through this to the Betwa Basin over here, right? And this is Betwa. Focusing upon the drought-prone Bundelkhand region. Phase 1, Daudhan Dam, 77 meters high in Panna Tiger Reserve for irrigation and power generation. Ken-Betwa Link Canal, 221 kilometer to transfer the water. This is the canal I'm talking about, right? Then we have the next phase, Lower Aur Dam, Bina Complex and Kota Barrage to address water scarcity in the Betwa Basin. So this is what the overall project is all about, can be important for the prelims. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to India's first case of bioterrorism, which relates to ricin. Now, ricin is a toxin which is produced from the castor beans, and allegedly a particular doctor has involved himself in basically manufacturing this particular toxin. So cases have been registered. Let's talk about ricin, can be very important for the prelims. Ricin is a protein that can be extracted from the castor beans, grown industrially for the castor oil production, and is fatal to humans even in small doses. With no antidote against its poisoning, the substance which lowers down the effect of the poison is known as antidote. But there is no recorded instance of ricin being used in mass casualty event, largely due to difficulties in producing it at scale in large amounts and lack of an effective delivery mechanism. So this is in a way the very first case of bioterrorism in India where a person is allegedly involved in the creation, in the manufacturing of ricin. Now this is the castor beans, you can just have a look, and it is from these castor beans that we produce the ricin. Characteristics and extraction. Ricin is a protein extracted from the castor bean, primarily grown for castor oil production in India, Brazil and China. The seed contains 30 to 60% castor oil, with ricin comprising 1 to 5% of the solid residue weight. Ricin is easily extracted from the seeds, making it significant concerns for the law enforcement due to its high lethality in small doses. It's highly fatal. Ricin binds to the ribosomes. Now, ribosomes are the areas where the production of the protein takes place in the cell. halting the protein synthesis and potentially causing multi-organ failure and death. Ingestion can lead to severe vomiting, diarrhea, hallucinations, seizures, and eventually multi-organ failure. Inhalation can cause respiratory issues such as difficulty breathing, coughing, and chest tightness. Challenges in treatment: no antidote exists for ricin. Remember that, can be asked in the prelims. Treatment is symptomatic. Symptoms must be managed due to ricin's rapid absorption before hospital arrival. Historical and military context, military interest and research. Ricin's high toxicity and availability attracted military interest, notably during World War I and II. Attempts were made to weaponize ricin, including Iraq's effort in 1980, and to develop it as an inhalable aerosol. Classification and criminal use. Ricin is classified as Schedule 1 toxin under the Chemical Weapons Convention. So it is classified as a toxin under the CWC, Chemical Weapons Convention, similar to nerve agents like sarin gas. Notable criminal use includes the assassination of dissident Bulgarian journalist Gorgy Markov in 1978. So do remember, can be asked in the prelims. Now coming to the next topic, this is with respect to the Denotified Tribes. Now these tribes have faced a lot of discrimination, not just from the commencement of the constitution, but even prior to that. They were labeled as criminal tribes under the colonial era laws. Now they have been asking for recognition under the categories of SC or OBC or ST. But the government has clearly said that there are no plans for classifying or recognizing these tribes in the SC or SC or OBC. The union government is not considering any proposal for distinct legal and constitutional recognition of a category on a par with SC, ST, OBC classifications for the denotified, nomadic and semi-nomadic tribes in India, the Tribal Affairs Ministry has told the Rajya Sabha. This comes even as these communities, formerly classified as criminal under the Colonial Era Criminal Tribes Act of 1871, are organizing to push for a separate column in the upcoming 2021 census forms for themselves in the hope of building it up into a movement for fresh classification for the communities that were once labeled as criminals. Let's talk about what these tribes are all about. The term Denotified Tribes refers to the communities that were once classified under the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871, which was implemented by the British government. The acts were abolished by the Government of India in 1952, leading to denotification of these communities. A few of these communities which were listed as denotified were also nomadic, right? Nomadic and semi-nomadic communities are defined as those who move from one place to the other rather than living in one place at all times. Banjaras, you must be aware of, right? So the Criminal Tribes Act, it basically asks these people to register in the police stations, right? And they were seen with utmost suspicion, though they never involved themselves in any of the bad activities, right? But still, they were looked with suspicion, and they were given the conditions, they were imposed, conditions were imposed on them that they have to register with the police and at all times mark their presence in the police stations. So again, a very discriminatory treatment was done. While most of the DNTs are spread across the SC, ST, OBC categories, some DNTs are not covered in any of the SC, ST or OBC categories. Distribution. DNTs encompass a wide range of communities, each with its own unique culture, practices, language and socio-economic conditions. Communities include the Kanjar, Nat, Pardhi and Sapera. South Asia is estimated to have the largest nomadic population in the world. In India, approximately 10% of the population comprises of NTs, SNTs and DNTs. While there are around 150 denotified tribes, the nomadic tribes population includes about 500 distinct communities. Major communities and commissions can be important for the prelims for the DNTs, NTs and SNTs. The Criminal Tribes Inquiry Committee of 1947 constituted in the United Provinces, now Uttar Pradesh. The Anant Sanyam Iyengar Committee of 1949, Criminal Tribes Act 1871 was repealed based on the recommendations of this particular committee. Kaka Kalelkar Commission, also known as the first OBC Commission of 1953, BP Mandal Commission of 1980. The commission also made some of the recommendations related to the issue of NTs, SNTs and DNTs, though it primarily dealt with the OBCs. The National Commission to Review the Working of the Constitution, 2002, held that DNTs have been wrongly stigmatized, stereotyped as crime-prone and subjected to high-handed treatment as well as exploitation by the representatives of law and order and the general society. Reinke Commission of 2005, the commission had estimated their population to be around 10 to 12 crores at that time. So this can be important. Go through it. There can be a question in the prelims. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic is a mention of the National Human Rights Commission, which has issued notice to the Meghalaya government over the killings of many of the mine workers because of the collapse of a rat hole mine over there, right? So the NHRC on Wednesday said that it has issued notice to the Meghalaya government and the state police chief over the reports that 18 workers died after a blast in an illegal coal mine, rat hole mine, we covered in the Analyst earlier this month. Now let's talk about the NHRC, and I've deliberately taken the snippets from the website to tell you the importance of the data or these websites, right? So the NHRC established under the Protection of Human Rights Act of 1993, and this is what the very objective is. About the organization, the NHRC of India, National Human Rights Commission of India, was established on 12th October 1993. The statute, the law, so it's a statutory body, under which it established is the Protection of Human Rights Act of 1993, amended by the Protection of Human Rights Amendment Act of 2019. Section 2, subclause 1, subclause D of the Act defines human rights as the rights relating to the life, liberty, equality. So remember, the Act itself defines what human right is all about. By the Constitution embodied in the international covenants and enforceable by courts in India. It is in conformity with the Paris Principles. Remember, can be asked in the prelims. Paris Principles deals with the human rights. Adopted at the first international workshop on the national institutions for the promotion and protection of human rights held in Paris in October 1991 and endorsed by the General Assembly of the United Nations by regulation this. The NHRC is an embodiment of India's concern for the promotion and protection of human rights. Composition, very important. As per Section 3 of the Protection of Human Rights Act, the composition of the commission is as follows. A chairperson who has been a Chief Justice of India or a judge of a Supreme Court. One member who is or has been a judge of the Supreme Court. One member who is or has been the Chief Justice of a High Court. 3 members, out of which at least one shall be woman, to be appointed from amongst the person having knowledge of or practical experience in the matters relating to the human rights. The chairperson of the National Commission for Backward Classes, National Commission for Minorities, National Commission for the Protection of Child Rights, National Commission for the Scheduled Castes, the National Commission for the Scheduled Tribes, the National Commission for Women, and the Chief Commissioner for the Persons with Disabilities shall be deemed to be members of the Commission. Ex officio members, right? There shall be a Secretary General who shall be the Chief Executive Officer of the Commission. This is what you'll have to understand. Next, we have the mission and the mission of NHRC. The NHRC India has been set up as by an Act of Parliament under the Protection of Human Rights Act of 1993 for the protection and promotion of the human rights. The Commission's functions are stated in Section 12 of the Act. In addition to investigating complaints of human rights violations or negligence by the officials, by the police officers or the administration, in preventing such violations by a public servant, the Commission studies treaties, international instruments on human rights, and makes recommendations to the government. The Commission is responsible for spreading the human rights awareness amongst the masses and encouraging the efforts of all the stakeholders in the human rights literacy, not just at national but also international levels. The NHRC is a unique institution because it is one of the few national human rights institutes, NHRIs, in the world whose chairperson is a former Chief Justice of the country or a judge of the Supreme Court. The world looks NHRC India as a role model in promoting and monitoring the effective implementation of promotion and protection. Now, this has been taken from the website, so definitely you can find these lines. Section 2, subclause 1, subclause D of the PHR Act defines human rights relating to life, liberty, equality, dignity. The NHRC India plays an active role in coordinating with the NHRIs of the world to enhance awareness from the perspective of human rights. Now, what are the functions? The NHRC's mandate is to protect and promote the human right, ensuring the compliance with the constitutional provisions and laws. It investigates human rights violations, negligence by the public servants, intervenes in court proceedings involving such violations, and monitors the conditions in prisons. So it can suo moto, take an action also, right? Though the recommendations of the NHRC are not binding on the government, but they are very important for the government, right? The government generally does not basically disregard the recommendations of the commission. Inquiry and investigation, it investigates human rights violations, negligence in preventing such violations. It can intervene in court proceedings involving human rights violations with approval of the court. It undertakes visit to the jails and other institutions, promotion and awareness, promotes human rights awareness, encourages the NGOs and institutions working in the human rights domain, studies the international human treaties and rights treaties and recommends their effective implementation, research and recommendations, undertakes and promotes research, reviews the safeguards for human rights under the Constitution and recommends the measures for their effective implementation, can recommend the compensation or prosecution against the guilty public servants, and may approach the Supreme Court or the High Courts. NHRC can requisition public records, so it has powers of a civil court. Remember, It submits annual reports to the central and the state government. It monitors the functioning of the mental hospitals and protection homes under the Supreme Court remit. Overall supervision. So you'll have to go through this. Very important body, has been in the news, can be asked in the prelims. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the last topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to the disease cholera. 5 hospitalized patients have tested positive for cholera in Jamnagar, increasing the overall count of cases to 20 so far. An official said on Wednesday, the infection is suspected to have spread through the contaminated drinking water supply linked to leaky underground water pipelines. And look, the article itself tells us what the disease is all about. Cholera is caused by the bacterium Vibrio cholerae, primarily spread through consuming food or water contaminated with feces from infected persons, leading to severe diarrhea and dehydration, a very infectious disease. Now, it's an acute diarrheal infection caused by eating or drinking food or water that is contaminated with the bacterium Vibrio cholerae. Cholera causes severe diarrhea or dehydration. Left untreated, the cholera may be fatal within hours, even in previously healthy people. The disease is most common in places with poor sanitation, crowding, war, or famine. Cholera outbreaks are more common in warm climates in the tropical countries. Cholera is predictable and preventable. It can ultimately be eliminated where access to clean water and sanitation facilities, as well as good hygiene practices, are ensured and sustained by whole population. Symptoms of cholera can begin as soon as in few hours to as long as 5 days after infection. Often symptoms are mild, but sometimes they are very serious, can be fatal. About 1 in 20 people infected have severe watery diarrhea accompanied by vomiting, which can quickly lead to dehydration. This can lead to the death if left untreated. Currently, there are 3 WHO pre-qualified oral cholera vaccine, OCV, Dukorol, Shancol, and Uvicol Plus. All 3 vaccines require 2 doses for full protection. Treatment for cholera can include rehydration therapy, antibiotics, and zinc supplementation. We have seen UPSC coming up with the questions with respect to the science part, with respect to different diseases. So that's the reason I've given this. Please go through that. Here we come at the end of the discussion. I hope it was really fruitful for you. All the very best. Thank you.